Is Morgan coming?
Welcome, everyone, to our February 26th board meeting. We'll call the meeting to order, and at this time we ask that you stand for the singing of our national anthem. Thank you very much. And Mr. Director, can you please assist us with reading the land acknowledgement?
Yes, through the chair. It's my honor to remind us that we honor the ancestral lands of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and Anishinaabe. And we're reminded through our Indigenous community that there's a treaty, a covenant, a dish with one spoon, also referred to as the wampum belt. And this is a reminder to all of us to honor this treaty by showing respect and responsibility for the land and the resources that we're so privileged to be on. And we do so in perpetuity, which means forever. And in the past, we have fallen short at times, but we're reminded from our Indigenous community that we walk alongside them as we learn through this journey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Director. And at this time, I'd like to welcome everyone to the boardroom. Before we get into our agenda or approval of the agenda, this is one of our special board meetings once a month when we get the opportunity to recognize students and particular achievements that they've shown within our schools and across the system. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our Superintendent, Sharon Stefanian. If you could introduce us this evening to our students that we're recognizing. Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair White. It is absolutely my honor this month, as it is every month, to introduce our trustees to a group of students from our schools who are making an impact not only in their school, but also in the broader community. So first up this evening, I would like to invite Jessika Buick Paul, a student from Sir John A. Macdonald Secondary School, to come forward to receive a Profiling Excellence Award in recognition for her YMCA Peace Medal Youth nomination. So if I could get Jessika to come down to the center. Round of applause. Jessika is described as a remarkable individual whose innate sense of caring is evident in everything that she does for others. So often we find that those who are so busy doing do not ask people to pay attention to their deeds. And the school is very delighted to honor Jessika because she is described as being inspirational to others in her school. A grade 12 student at Sir John A. Macdonald, a school that Jessika has been at since grade 9 and that she is very passionate about. She cares deeply about her school. She's described as having an phenomenal average at 89%, great attendance, and doing all of this while balancing her commitment to her school with the passion that she has for helping others. Jessika can often be seen volunteering her time at Martha House and is involved with the community dinner delivery because she feels very grateful for what she has and believes that even doing the smallest things for others can make a huge difference in their lives. In her words, people go about their day and don't realize that the coffee they just grabbed on their way to work is the very thing that many individuals can't have. And just giving someone a cup at dinner can mean the absolute world to them. It can make their day. I saw how important that is, and I want to commit my future to doing that extremely important work. Jessika was responsible for organizing therapy dogs, support for colleagues during exams as part of wellness. And her collective acts of giving were recognized by the YMCA during the Peace Medal Awards, which is why we are here this evening. In her future, Jessika plans to enter into the world of social work, which is something that we can clearly see from all of the work that she's involved in at the school and in the community. She is well on her way. And I understand that will be following in her mother's footsteps. So Jessika, on behalf of all of us, thank you for all of the work that you do in the community and at Sir John A. Macdonald, and congratulations on your Peace Medal nomination. Next up this evening, we have a group recognition, and I would like to invite these students who are part of the Nora Francis Henderson Husky Peer Leadership Group to come forward. I believe we have 4 of the individuals with us, so come on down, folks. And a round of applause for this group of students. So we have here joining us this evening, we have Jenny Brown, Lena Darwish, Danielle Lund, and Rachel Kudrenski. And we'd also like to recognize and congratulate Erika MacKinnon, Rachel Johns, Ivy Tu, and Keyierah, there we go, thank you, Keyierah Miller, who weren't able to join us this evening. But the group that you're seeing in front of you is part of a very strong group, the Husky Peer Leadership Group at Nora Francis Henderson. And this group of individuals won a YMCA Peace Medal in the group category. When 2 schools merged into the new Nora Francis Henderson Secondary School, students were brought together to discuss issues such as understanding identity, leadership, discrimination, prejudice, and stereotypes. The Husky Peer Leadership Group focused on educating students about diversity. They talked about the importance of encouraging respect. How do you bring 2 distinct communities together and create and foster a new community identity within our school? And how do you provide opportunities for students to take on leadership roles with their peers? So through workshops, through school events, through activities and speakers, this group of individuals organized collectively to promote and encourage a positive school culture in a new environment, bringing together 2 communities. Certainly very evident why this group received a YMCA Peace Medal Award. So please join me in congratulating our students from Nora Francis Henderson. Thank you for all of your work in creating a positive culture at your school. And Chair White, that concludes Profiling Excellence for this month.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Stefanian, for those kind words about our recipients this evening. And on behalf of the Board of Trustees, I would like to congratulate all of our YMCA Peace Medal winners as well. And we're so proud to have you here in our boardroom and join in your success. So thank you once again on behalf of the Board of Trustees. So at this time, I would like to once again welcome everyone to the board meeting. Trustees, we do have regrets from Student Trustee Jail. Otherwise, everyone else is present. Welcome to Executive Council, staff, those joining us at home, those joining us in the gallery. I won't say who in the gallery is related to Larry Pattison, but you can guess which ones. And also welcome to members of our local media as well. So with that, looking for an approval of the agenda. Moved by Trustee Pattison, thank you. Seconded Trustee Hicks, thank you. Any questions or comments about the agenda? All in favor? That is unanimous. Any declarations of conflict of interest on tonight's agenda? Seeing none. Confirmation of the minutes, February 12th. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll jump right into our trustee special committee reports, beginning with item 7, our policy committee from February 14th. We'll turn to the chair of policy, Christine Bingham. Trustee Bingham.
I feel like I'm a million miles away. So we had 2 action items. One was 21st century learning, and we had quite a discussion on this. The policy is up for its scheduled review and aligns with the Government of Ontario's Winter 2016 Education 21st Century Competencies Foundation document for discussion. The committee requested that the Code of Conduct policy be updated to include both the physical and digital space. Staff noted that these changes could be brought forward at the April policy meeting for review and consideration. The committee also requested that references to the Code of Conduct be placed within the policy under terminology and within the progress indicators where appropriate. The second was fraud management. The committee considered the fraud management policy returning from a 30-day public consultation period, and based upon feedback received, staff have made no additional changes to the policy. And with that, I present the motion.
Thank you very much, Trustee Bingham. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Trustee D. Thank you. The report is on the floor. 2 action items. Looking for questions, comments, speakers. Trustee Danko.
Can I request to separate out items A and B?
Okay. Seeing as there's only 2 items, we'll begin with item A, 21st century learning policy. Questions, debate on the item A. Trustee Danko.
Thank you. Through the chair, I had a couple of questions. I had hoped to see something added to this policy that was more clear about when and where devices that we provide by a board would be used in our schools. The policy itself, of course, says all of the right things. It captures how we should be using technology, how we should be fostering the 21st century competencies in students. The question I have, the action required talks about monitoring procedures. And in the list of procedures, I don't see something that is specific to monitoring how and when devices are used, or a procedure about how and when devices are used. And then to follow that, under the assessment on 7A-4, it looks like there is an expectation that there are site-specific procedures for the appropriate use of personal and board provision electronic devices. So if I'm reading that correctly, I guess my second question is, are we expecting schools to have their own procedures for the use of board-provided devices, or do we have a procedure somewhere that outlines how those devices are to be used across our entire board?
Thank you very much. I'll look to the Associate Director that oversees policy, Superintendent, Associate Director, whatever your name is, Silvern.
Thank you, and through the chair. To respond to the question around the use or a procedure around the use, once again, we see digital devices, those provisioned by the board as learning resources. And with that, we do provide the guidance and professional learning to our staff, as we would with any learning resources. But ultimately, we do rely on the professional judgment of our teachers, of our educators in schools, to utilize these resources as they see would be a best fit, both within the classroom and within the school itself.
Thank you. Trustee Danko?
Thank you. And then just to clarify, does that then mean that our board devices that we have paid for, that we have insured, are then able to be used during lunch periods when a teacher is not necessarily in the classroom, but are usually monitoring from the hallways?
Thank you. Associate Director?
Thank you for the question. Again, through the chair, the provision of any learning resources, even a device, a digital device, would be something that we would entrust our staff under the supervision of our principals to determine the appropriateness of its use. Its primary use is for learning. It's for learning in a classroom. But I could not say that we would exclude any other time as a learning opportunity if it was outside of those classroom hours.
Thank you. Trustee Danko?
Thank you. And to follow on that, if one of our devices, a board-provided device, was to be accessible to students during the lunch period, and we are looking at that as a learning opportunity, is there any way that staff or anyone is accountable to check how that device is being used, or to ask the student what the purpose of them using the device at that period would be? Are we checking in with the student to make sure it's actually a learning opportunity and not just accessing YouTube videos that perhaps are not the best for learning?
Okay. Associate Director?
Thank you. And through the chair, at all times, and I'll speak primarily to our elementary schools, our students are supervised by our staff during the hours at which they are at school, and that would include nutrition breaks, unstructured time, if you will, and anything that a student would be doing during that time, whether it's with a digital device or something else, would again be under that supervision of the staff. The appropriateness of the activity, of their behavior, would be again within their professional discretion as to question whether or not that's the type of conduct that we would expect at school.
Thank you. Trustee Danko?
Thank you. Through the chair, have we talked to our union groups to discover if this is an additional task that we're requiring teachers to now supervise and monitor, that wasn't traditionally a role that they had?
Thank you. Associate Director?
Thank you. And through the chair, I'll begin, and then if my colleague, the Superintendent of Human Resources, has anything to add in terms of our union partners, I would turn to him. But in terms of, again, supervision of students, we say this often, we live in a world that is both, physical and also digital. And that's just our state of affairs at this point in time. And so the expectation would be that if students are accessing that digital space, that would fall under, again, the supervision of our staff to determine whether or not what they were accessing, what they were doing would be appropriate. No different than if they had something that was physical in their hands, let's say a magazine that they might be reading or perusing during a nutrition break.
Thank you very much. Was there anything to add, Superintendent Nunn?
Through you, Mr. Chair, nothing further.
Thank you very much. Trustee Danko?
Okay, and I'm just mindful of my time. So if we wanted to see a site-specific procedure for a school, a parent has a child attending, where would they access that procedure?
Thank you. Super Executive Associate Director Sofa?
Thank you, and through the chair. In terms of a procedure at a school, we have complementing each one of our board policies, board procedures. What we would expect at a school level is that as a school, they exercise their judgment as to appropriateness, guidelines that they might place in consultation with staff, with school councils, all aligning with our overall policies and procedures of the board. So explicitly stating a procedure or a written out procedure is not something that we ask our schools to do, but we do ask them to ensure that they are following our board policy and associated procedures.
Thank you very much. Trustee Danko?
Thank you. And I'm just looking at the language on 7A-4 that specifically talks about procedures. So the first section, intended outcome and assessment, talks about auditing select schools to ensure the learning environments include procedures for the appropriate use of personal and board provisioned electronic devices. And the second assessment also says the site-specific procedures for the appropriate use of personal and board provisioned electronic devices. So is that language that should be changed in the policy?
Thank you, Trustee Danko. Can you just point us to that again? So we're looking on 4A-4?
7A-4.
Sorry, 7A-4. And which bullet points?
Under the first assessment, it's bullet point number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And under the second assessment item, it's bullet point number 2.
Okay, so the question to staff is whether those align with the current practices and whether we require a policy change. Is that the question?
I've heard in the last answer that we have guidelines, but not specifically written out procedures, but the policy refers to procedures that are on site. So I'm not sure that there's a consistency there.
Okay, so we're asking through the Associate Director, we'll begin with bullet point, I think it was 6, under the first intended outcome and assessment, procedures for the appropriate use of personal and board provisioned electronic devices. So let's ask that question first. So when an audit were to take place, how do we ensure that bullet point, and is it in fact accurate? Associate Director Sofrin.
Thank you. And through the chair, it's an excellent question, and I think we will take that away to ensure we have clarity of language so that there isn't confusion between board policy and procedure and what we would consider implementation of that at a school level. Again, we wouldn't want to have confusion or something that would be conflicting that would be at a particular school site that conflicts with board policy or procedure. So thank you for that, and we'll take it away, and I think we'll amend the language to adjust it so there isn't that confusion.
Okay, thank you. And then secondly, this may be the same answer, but the second bullet point in the second intended outcome and assessment reads the site-specific procedures for the appropriate use of personal and board provisioned electronic devices. Is that the same? Thank you very much. Trustee Danko.
If that's going to be taken away, will this be approved potentially tonight, or would this be deferred to a future meeting?
I think if we capture the intent of what's written here, I think staff can make a minor change that's more housekeeping. If it changes the direction of the policy, then it would have to go back to the policy committee and be vetted and approved. But what I'm gathering is that it would be more of a housekeeping item, so the intent is more clearly captured, but we can go in whichever direction the board chooses.
And thank you. Through the chair, I would refer this back to policy, in part because I think parents should have the expectations that they can go to their school, find out what the procedure is for electronic devices, and understand that procedure, understand the expectations for their child so that they are adhering to the code of conduct, and so that they can actually participate in building that procedure from year to year. We often use our school councils as advisory committees to the principal. Without having clear procedures that are actually in writing that parents can access at the school level, I don't believe that this policy is quite where we need it to be. Personally, I'd like to see a little more teeth in it in terms of what expectations are for responsible uses of devices, but I would like to send this back to policy.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll accept the motion to refer it back to the committee. We'll get a seconder, and then I'll just clarify one thing before we proceed. Do we have a seconder on the referral? Trustee Deeth, thank you. Just to the Associate Director again on the 2 bullet points, just so, because the question came to me, but I want to get staff's understanding on this. When we refer back to those 2 bullet points that we just discussed, what is staff's intention in terms of changing those? Is it the intention that written procedures would be mandatory at schools? What is the intent? You know, just so we can better understand if it is referred back or not, or what staff was hoping to change.
Thank you. And through the chair, in terms of clarifying the language, it would be so that we ensure we have a board policy and board procedure, and that's what's followed at each one of our schools. That, of course, we would listen to the voice through school council of staff, but what we don't want to have are procedures that are at a school level that are contradictory to those that are part of a procedure that follows a board policy. So the amendment that we would recommend is that it not be site-specific procedures, but in fact that they are aware and that they follow the procedures that are associated with this policy.
Okay, so the clarity is to remove the site-specific written procedure the way that it could be written and instead refer more to a board written procedure. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure we get that clear. Okay, and Trustee Danko?
So on that point, would that mean that we would then develop a board-specific procedure titled The Appropriate Use of Personal and Board Provisioned Electronic Devices?
Yeah, that was my next clarification before we dive into this. Associate Director.
Within the procedures that we would create or amend to this policy, we would include that in terms of one of the aspects that we would cover within the board procedures.
So it doesn't exist yet, correct? Yes. So, but the intention is that it will be written and attached to this policy as a procedure, but it's not currently for trustees to reference or community to reference. Is that correct?
We do have procedures around appropriate use of devices and of learning resources, but what we would take away from this is we will update the current procedure to ensure that it does state whether it's appropriate or responsible use of personal and board provisioned digital devices or electronic devices.
All right, that clarifies. Thank you very much. So that procedure is forthcoming. So, or at least amendment to the procedure is forthcoming, not for approval by the board, but for information to the board. So with that, going back to the motion to refer this to the policy committee, it's moved and seconded. So I'll start with Trustee Danko. You can speak to the referral motion.
Thank you, and through the chair, I know that I've made my sentiments clear previously, but I do believe that as a board who is providing students with devices for educational use, we have a responsibility to ensure that that is appropriate use, that it is supervised, and it is for educational purposes. And we do have an accountability to families so that they can understand clearly what the expectations are in schools when they send their children to us. So as much as I believe a new procedure or an updated procedure will be the place to clearly outline what those expectations are, we don't have that yet. And I would prefer to wait to approve this policy until that procedure is created or amended.
All right, thank you very much. So just clarity, so it'd be referring it back to the policy committee until such time that the procedure is developed to then continue?
As trustees, we only have the ability to set direction through our policies. And so if we're not happy with the procedure, policy would be the place to then further discuss if we need to make changes at this level to direct the procedure more specifically.
Okay, so that
so
would
it's
be
hard to approve this without understanding what that procedure would
what the
look like.
procedure is.
Thank
Okay,
you.
that's helpful. Thank you. Because then we would know where to place it on the policy agenda. Trustee Deeth as the seconder.
I think, as Trustee Danko said, I think it's important to have clarification. What I'm finding is that it often comes up, the conversation comes up with parents. And recently I was at a parent council meeting a couple of weeks ago, and the topic of handheld devices came up again. So I think it's important that we have clarity within this, and that we are aware of what it is, and parents know where to find that, and to understand that procedure properly.
Further debate? Trustee Beatty, and then Trustee Paz.
Sorry, through the chair, just a question of clarification. Maybe Trustee Danko can just reaffirm that your wish is to send the policy back to policy committee to wait until the procedure is created and then bring it back to board with the policy and the procedure together for final approval. Is that correct? Through the chair?
Yes, and then the procedure only for information purposes through that process.
I'm just coming at this from a standpoint of our procedures. Is that normal? Is that what we normally do, or do policies normally get created and then procedures come after? Through the chair.
Sorry, just that last pull-up point or last point.
I'm just curious as to the process that we normally follow. It's my understanding we create policy and then the procedures are operationalized by staff at a later date.
So, I mean, I'll begin, but I'll ask the trustee officer to weigh in on that as she oversees the agendas, in most cases on policy. We've done it both ways in the past. The older way of doing it, I think we would see them hand in hand. I think the newer way has been policy and then staff write the procedures. It has changed, but in terms of the more recent norm, I'll ask Trustee Officer Miller.
Through the chair, the procedures that come forward to the policy committee come through under a consent item based on the pillars that we have. So if the referral is for this policy to go back, I can try to time it in the same month that consent item comes forward with the procedures in it, and then you would see it as a hand-in-hand, but it might not be done this particular school year. Like that consent item might not be up until September or October.
Thank you. Trustee Beatty?
So if that were the case, then the policy doesn't get passed until the consent item comes forward, which means that there is no policy on the book, or the updated version at least is held in abeyance until such time as we reach completion, which could be a lengthy period of time between now and then with no updated policy at all.
That's right.
Whereas if the policy was passed tonight, then the procedure is written underneath the policy, and then the consent item brought forward at a later date. But at least we have the policy in place.
That's
okay.
correct.
I just want to understand. Thank you.
Further debate. Trustee Pattison.
Sorry, thank you, Chair White. Just a clarification on the last point by Trustee Beatty. So the policy, the existing policy, will still stand in the interim, right? While we're debating for the next few months to bring back well, this hasn't even been altered at all, has it? Chair White?
Yeah, so that is correct. There is an existing policy, so this isn't a brand new policy. And also through the recent discussions, there haven't been considerable changes. When there are, it typically goes through our lengthier policy approval process, which includes consultation and all the other steps. In this case, there were some minor changes, but it's essentially was scheduled for review, and that's where it is now without consultation.
Thank you for the clarification. It seems to me when policies come to board here, it's not very often that we defer them back, so I don't really see the harm in trustees seeing something that they'd really like to address and hold off for now. So I think it's important that we come back with some consensus later on when we all are happy with the plans and procedures that are in place for this. Talking about supervision of the devices at nutrition breaks, I'm not sure about any other trustees, but I certainly got calls where there's been inappropriate videos. So we all know that also students are in charge of themselves, their peers during nutrition breaks. So there's certainly a lot of opportunity for kids to get into mischief having devices during this unsupervised teacher time. Another question I have is, when do we send policies for a survey? What prompts us to send something to survey?
So for consultation, any new policy that hasn't been created would automatically, unless it's ministry mandated, it would go to consultation. Also, when a policy comes up for review, typically if there are moderate or major changes, it would go to consultation. When there's only minor or more housekeeping changes, then it may just come directly to board for approval.
Okay, just thinking of, I'm not sure how long now we've been looking at 21st century learning and devices in our schools, and I'm not sure if are we there yet with having the packs in all of our schools of the iPads? And
We're well on our way, but Mr. Director, in terms of where we are this school year?
Through the chair, further information will come for trustee approval through the budget process in our May TLE report. But currently, as we stand, we have the 7 North elementary schools at 1-to-1, grade 4 to 8. The rest of our elementary schools have class kits of 6, 4 to 8. And we're currently in our secondary schools, grade 9 to 10, 1-to-1. And we'll be bringing forward the next step in our report in May.
Okay, and then so just to reiterate the middle point, most schools 4 to 8 have a class kit.
Correct.
Thank you. Trustee Pattison?
so just in line with the survey discussion is that now we've had many years where we've been slowly rolling out the TLE, and now, as the Director Figueredo stated, we have class kits in all of our 4 to 8 schools. And it looks to those numbers, most of our schools anyways. So, I mean, we've had a lot of opportunity to kind of test the water, see what's working, see what's not working, and see where our parent concerns. So it almost seems that it would be relevant to have this go to some kind of a survey or some kind of or to pick or something to have them talk about, what are some of the concerns that have come up, over the years as we look at, as we're waiting to talk about this again in September, October. What Trustee Danko was talking about having parents access some kind of a guideline, I like the idea of parent council being able to talk about that in their own schools, to be able to, some things could be, site specific. I mean, obviously you want to have kind of an overarching board policy, but to have procedures that are kind kind of specific to schools, I don't think that's such a bad idea. Especially if there's been some instances at the schools, then the parent council can talk about, okay, maybe we're going to take these devices away at break time, right? Because of incidents that have happened, and just have that parent and feedback on the use of these devices. And I just want to thank Trustee Danko for all the questions here, because certainly a lot of things that I wouldn't have thought about reading over this policy. I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Pattison. Further speakers, Trustee Van Geffen.
Thank you. So to the motion to defer it, what policy meeting would we then be seeing this at? Do staff know? Or chair?
Yeah, we'll ask the associate director in terms of the development of, seen as the impetus would be the development of the procedure. So what would the timing on the procedure be, Associate Director Sovern?
Again, through the chair, we would take this away. I'd work with Officer Miller and determine what would be the best time to bring this back. If the will of the board is that all of the procedures associated with this policy be fully developed so that they come back as a consent item at a policy meeting, I would, again, work with Heather, but we'd be looking at probably the fall.
Okay, so probably the fall unless the board otherwise determines another timeline. Trustee Van Geffen.
So I'm neither here nor there on this. I mean, it's not as though at the policy committee we're just twiddling our thumbs and waiting for things to come back. If we have to flesh this out further, because I did move it at the committee level, satisfied. But my next question has to do with, I raised this when this policy came up and we made revisions. So we're talking about appropriate use right now, and one of the requests, as captured in the discussion from the committee, was our code of conduct policy, and aligning our code of conduct policy along with this updated policy, because we don't really recognize the digital space as it's stated in here that our students have. So bringing this back, how does this align with bringing that code of conduct piece back? And should the two of them come back beforehand? Because if it's the fall, then are we doing the code of conduct piece before then we do the 21st century learning piece? Because that was kind of the thought was aligning the code of conduct with the 21st century piece. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. And again, neither here nor there. I just trying to get a sense of what this is going to look like.
So the code of conduct, which was requested by the committee to come back in April, would not be able to come back because the definitions mainly are contained in this new updated policy. So therefore, without this approval, we can't do the code of conduct. So to answer the question, code of conduct would come back in the fall with probably this policy. It's kind of chicken egg, and this would come first, then the updates to code of conduct policy.
So I guess my next question would be, and if it's the fall, so be it the fall, but part of the discussion that took place at the committee level was, okay, so we're going to talk about our code of conduct policy and then the procedure underneath that, but then we were also going to talk from a school level and what, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but what each individual school conveys to their students and staff in terms of appropriate use and all of that. And my hope was that we were going to have something in place so that when it came to September 2018, and if we're talking in the fall, then in terms of implementation within the school, if there were going to be changes coming around, then we're talking like September 2019, or is this something that can be done on the fly as we get into a new school year? Like I'm hoping we can see this before the end of the school year. I'm not the chair of the committee, and I would never make it. But that's just my take on this. And I guess I'll close with saying we don't have Trustee Danko on the policy committee, but when this comes back, she's always been a member of the policy committee, much value, contributes a lot more than I do to the policy committee. If we can align when this comes back with her being there, I think there's great value before it comes back to board, if that's possible. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. And was there a question there at the end, or is that just your conclusion?
That was my conclusion, but it was the timing piece. So the timing piece of the implementation from the schools, if that was the intent with the code of conduct piece.
Okay. And what I'm hearing right now is fall, I believe, unless otherwise determined. When that new when in the fall was the question, and I assume that would be once the work plan's developed for next year, which it hasn't been yet. It's sketched out roughly, but it will be done at some point. Okay, further speakers. We have nobody. We have student trustee High. I was looking. I thought you were just hot, waving or something. Anyways, go ahead.
So in addition to being deferred back to policy, would the policy itself be able to come back to Student Senate?
Absolutely, it could. I think you would want to bring it there in terms of a consultation. There aren't major changes. If the policy committee decided there were, then they would do a full consultation. But I think if you think it would be beneficial, we'd assist student trustees with bringing that back to Student Senate. Yeah. Thank you. Further speakers? Question for clarification on the referral, Trustee Beatty, on procedure, governance. Go ahead. Anything you feel like.
Thank you. We are voting to send this back to the policy committee. There was mention of an additional policy. I think it was the code of conduct policy. And what can you refresh my memory on the timeline that changes for the review of that policy if this doesn't pass tonight?
So code of conduct, if I recall, is scheduled for its regular review next school year. It's not this school year. And what we had said at the committee was, let's bring it back early, not for a full review, but to update a number of definitions and elements around both physical and digital space. So those are the definitions that would be pulled from the policy on the table right now. So that was the timeline piece. Otherwise, we could just wait for its regular review, which I believe is 2018-19 school year.
But it would allow for these two policies to have some form of alignment in them. And it has been mentioned, I think, by staff that the code of conduct is an important piece to governing how devices are used in the schools. And if the two policies remain out of alignment, then that does make it more difficult. Yes or no?
That's a sovereign question. Associate Director.
Thank you. And through the chair, I would ask just Trustee Beatty if you can add the last piece, as Director Figueiredo was whispering in my ear, and I can't balance both at the same time during this time of night. So, and it's rare that I actually get to bounce it back to Director Figueiredo, but this time I can, so I will. Sorry, if you could just repeat the last part of the question.
Certainly, and that's a heck of a whisper, I might add. My question was pertaining to if the intent was that the 21st Century Learning Policy and the Code of Conduct Policy would be written in such a fashion as to align them, to make them work in conjunction with each other, knowing the importance of the Code of Conduct in terms of governing the use of devices in our schools. How does that affect being able to put this all together into a cohesive package in terms of having both policies in alignment and ready to go to work in our schools?
Thank you. And through the chair. So our initial intent was once the 21st Century Learning Policy would be approved, we would take those pieces and just make those clarification amendments to the Code of Conduct, really is the way we see it. We want to reassure the board that the Code of Conduct, the way it is written now, can still be applied to inappropriate use of a learning resource, whether it be a digital device or a non-digital device. So the Code of Conduct is still overarching and still applies. What we were hoping to accomplish was further clarity once we had the language from the 21st Century Policy to make those amendments to the Code of Conduct. Code of Conduct, as Chair White has said, is scheduled for its review next year, which would be a full review of the entire policy. But we were hoping just to make those amendments now. I would say that, again, be confident that we can still apply the code of conduct as it is now without the explicit terminology of digital devices in there.
Thank you. Further speakers? Seeing none. So the motion is to refer this policy back to the policy committee to align with the procedures coming forward that are attached. All in favor? Trustees Archer, Hicks, Pattison, Mulholland, Johnstone, Danko, Student Trustees High, Trustee Deeth, all those opposed. Trustees Bingham, Beatty, White, Van Geffen. The motion carries. We'll add it to the policy agenda, and we'll see it likely sometime in the fall, but we'll maneuver it as more information comes forward. Thank you very much. We now have a second policy as part of the policy report. It's item B, fraud management policy. 7-1 is still the page we're on. Just a reminder that this is an approval of the policy. It's been through consultation, as Trustee Bingham mentioned. It's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments? All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Moving to our item 8, Finance and Facilities Committee report, February 14th. Chair of Finance and Facilities, Trustee Van Geffen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to move this report from February the 14th, Valentine's Day. We received, as trustees, we kicked this meeting off with a delegation of 2 very engaged and well-informed students from Westmount, Cassie and Emma. I can do Cassie Chamberlain's. I'm not going to butcher Emma's last name, but they came forward and did a great presentation and shared a lot of the research that they have done with the benefit of having solar panels installed into Westmount. So we had a great presentation. We had some good questions afterwards, and then we made an amendment to our agenda to discuss this further. As a result, this was actually a committee report that was all monitoring items, and then we had a lot of action that ended up coming out of it. So the first action item you see was a motion that staff explore the feasibility of solar panels at Westmount Secondary School and report back to the Finance and Facilities Committee. So as staff come back and report back, we will surely reach out to Cassie and Emma and the Westmount Eco Ninjas and bring them back into the conversation. Second action item that you see is the FI boundary review for East Hamilton and Lower Stoney Creek. Trustees will recall this was a monitoring item. Staff were bringing forward some new information. Trustees that may not be familiar with this area, staff presented a report on the proposed transition and the startup of the 2 new FI programs in the east end of Hamilton and Lower Stoney Creek. In this report, staff brought forward a telephone survey that was conducted where all parents and guardians of grade 1 students registered for French immersion at Eastdale or Parkdale to determine if there was an interest remaining at Glen Echo. So what I'll get to is the action item here, which was Trustee White moving that all existing FI students living within the new East Hamilton and Lower Stoney Creek FI catchments continue at Glen Echo and Glen Bray and relocate to the new area FI schools as identified through the East Hamilton and Lower Stoney Creek FI boundary review for September 2020. That was the action. What's important to know is that next year, at this time, staff will offer the same registration options in September 2019, which is Glen Echo, Parkdale, and Eastdale, and will determine the feasibility of the program. Much of the conversation at the committee level was that determining the feasibility of that will be something in line, whether that's who's driving that in terms of a communication outreach to parents for that next cohort that's coming through. So before I butcher that item anymore. I'm just going to move on to the, and my apologies to EastEnders if I got any part of that wrong. Please correct me after I deliver this report. Finally, we had a monitoring item. This is our quarterly capital projects construction update brought to us by our Senior Facilities Officer, David Anderson, to which we were happy to receive and had many, many questions for him. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will move the report.
Thank you very much, Trustee Van Geffen. Do we have a seconder? Trustee Pattison. Thank you. Questions? One delegation, two action, one monitoring. Trustee Pattison.
First, can I ask that we separate, pull item C, please?
So in that case, let's hold that item for a moment. And any questions on items A, B, or D? Yes, Trustee Danko.
Thank you, through the chair. I was just wondering if there was any exciting news that the facilities officer might have for me for Ward 7 or not. That's all I needed. Thanks.
When that exciting news becomes available, we'll give you a call. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on items A, B, or D? All in favor? Thank you very much. That leaves C remaining, still moved and seconded. Discussing separately, Trustee Pattison.
Thank you, Chair White. First, I'd like to thank all those who were involved in the French immersion discussions, transition committees, etc. I know it's a lot of work, and I know transitions in general are really difficult. There's a lot to be discussed, and I know we make a lot of provisions in those first couple of years to make it as smooth as possible for children. My first question is, if we pass C tonight, does that mean that there's no discussion to be had about offering 6 to 8 at Ballard? Or is this like, once this is approved, then all the plans are in place for September?
Thank you. We'll go to Associate Director, Mr. Director, Associate Mr. Director, Mr. Associate Director, Superintendent Gillies.
Yes, I will pass on Superintendent Gillies. Just a clarification for Trustee Pattison's question. The question is, if this motion is passed tonight, what does it mean for September 2018 and beyond, or just September 2018?
Trustee Pattison?
Just for September. Well, I'm not sure if it's also true for grade 6, but I know in here you did mention that you will open that discussion back up for grades 1 next year as well. But it's really more for just grade 6. I'm just worried about either this year or the following year.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. I'll ask Superintendent Gillies to provide that answer.
Thank you. And through the chair, with this motion, grades 2 to 8 for next year, the motion is that those students currently at Glen Echo and Glen Bray will remain at Glen Echo and Glen Bray until September 2020.
Thank you. Actually, and I see a slight flaw here, and I see where Trustee Pattison's going with this. Cunningham, they know they currently do not remain at either Glen Echo or Glen Bray. Where would they be directed next September? I know the intention, but I'm noticing in the wording, it doesn't necessarily say it, but so as Superintendent Gillies.
Thank you. Through the chair, so as is currently the process following AM Cunningham, students go to Glen Bray, and that would continue for next year.
Thank you. And we may want to readjust that wording, because I think that might just be a small oversight. But Trustee Pattison?
Thank you, Chair White. And I should have also mentioned that thanks to Superintendent Gillies and Dunlop, who both took some time out today to answer some of my questions. So I did have an opportunity to discuss this with both of them. I guess my concern with all of this is just the number of transitions. I mean, if the kids who we surveyed for grade 1 all said that, yeah, we'd rather go to Glen Echo for now, or sorry, I always forget which one's which, Glen Bray. And then, but that means that the grade 1 students this year and then the grade 1 students next year once the new school's built, they're going to have to either move to Parkdale or Eastdale or wherever. And same thing for the M. Cunningham kids who, the grade 6s this year and next year will go to Glen Echo, and then they're going to have to move back to Ballard for, the grade 8s would go back for 1 year, the grade 7s would go back for 2 years, and it just seems in a board that always talks about transitions, that that's going to be a heck of a lot of transitions for these kids. I know some of the discussions that I heard were, they wanting to keep siblings together, which is I know something we always do anyways. I mean, that's never usually an issue for a transition to keep siblings together. But a survey was done for the grade 1s, and I feel that a survey for grade 5s going into grade 6 might have given us a reason to open up the programming at Ballard. I mean, Ballard is right around the corner from AM Cunningham, and to send those students all the way down to Glen Echo, if they would prefer to go to Ballard, it just seems like it's not fair to at least have a voice in that decision. I did a small poll just on my Facebook page. 6 people responded, but all 6 of them said that, yeah, sure, I would love to go to Ballard if it had been given as an option. So I would certainly like to see in recommendation. I see that 70 of you are present and 70 of you have passed that this move forward, but I would certainly like to make a recommendation that we hold off on this decision and do a survey or split it up somehow that we can approve the grade 1s and have a separate discussion about grade 6s and see if there is an appetite to start a program in Ballard. I mean, I know we've done it, schools like Sherwood where we started grade 9, we had, 1 class or 2 classes, whatever it is, and we worked our way up. So it would be nice, I would like to see it at least considered. And I think that's all I have to say on that item. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Pattison. So on that item, I'm just wondering, and that's what I was going to try to summarize, but we'll go to the chair of the committee, Trustee Van Geffen.
So just to the Ballard piece, just want clarity whether we're talking September 2018 or September 2019.
Well, it would be nice to have an option for both, too. It would be nice to actually survey parents now and say, would you be interested in Ballard for September? And also, as we're going to do with the Parkdale and other cohorts, we're also going to say next year, we're going to say, would you rather start at Parkdale next year? So why not give them the option this year and next year for grade 6s to determine whether or not they'd like to go to Ballard.
Thank you.
So, and just for my own understanding, like my interpretation of the discussion that we had at the committee level was when it comes to looking at September 2019, that we're going to get into that survey piece again, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but we can raise this, what the communication plan is going to look like prior to the survey happening and going out to make sure that we capture all of that. My only hesitation is September 2018 to bring Ballard into this mix after a communication piece has already gone out. I struggle, and giving staffing and everything right now, I struggle with whether that's feasible and responsible for this coming school year.
Thank you. I'll just let Trustee Pattison just clarify as well, just so we can make sure we're all talking about the same thing. Trustee Pattison?
Yes, I mean, I'm not sure how long that phone survey took. I'm sure that didn't really take long to just call parents and kind of do a soft check to see what the interest would be, and to do it now. I mean, I guess that's all timing. I mean, if we're going to look at what's the deadline to be able to pass this? Does it have to pass today, or do we have another month to kind of play with?
Yep.
I wouldn't think that any communication has been out yet because we haven't voted on it yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Thank you. So we'll go to, from a timing perspective, Associate Director Sovern.
Thank you. Actually, I'm going to defer our staffing timelines to Superintendent Nunn for clarity around the staffing timelines.
Superintendent Nunn?
So staffing decisions would need to be made by April the 15th.
Thank you very much. Trustee Pattison?
So I guess the question is, what's the soonest we can get back? How long would a survey take for AM Cunningham kids, and how fast could we be back here to vote on this again?
Thank you very much. Mr. Director?
So through the chair, we would, depending on the extent of the survey, what's expected, who we reach out to, we would have to come back a month from now with the potential results, because unlike the grade 1, we knew people who had registered and showed interest. So we would have to reach out to the current grade 6 parents and reach out. My fear is we've already begun the staffing timeline process already, although it's April 14th. The staffing process has already begun with our principals around school organizations and discussions. So we start that right away in February 1st. So I'm concerned about the impact it would have on our staffing for September 2018 and meeting that timeline.
All right, thank you very much. I'll go back to the chair of the committee, and then I just want to summarize just in terms of what we are discussing. And we'll go to a question from Trustee Johnstone as well, but Trustee Van Geffen, go ahead.
So just clarity on, we've got a motion here, but we have a previous motion from when this French immersion came through. What direction was put in place from that previous motion? I know I should probably have that, but just seeking clarity through the chair and our Officer of Trustee Services.
Okay. So with that, there are about 3 different pieces right now on this topic. The first is what you just mentioned, Trustee Van Geffen, which is a previous motion determining what would happen with incoming grade 1s. And during that same motion, we set boundaries for all of the above schools, Parkdale, Ballard, and Stoney Creek, Green Acres / Eastdale. That's the first piece that's already approved. The next piece, which is what is in front of us today, is what do we do with all of the other existing students at Glen Echo and Glen Bray? And that's what this motion speaks to. The third element that Trustee Pattison has raised is a bit different, because that's referring to specifically the grade 5 class at AM Cunningham, and sampling that class to see if any of them would like to start an FI program in grade 6 at Ballard next September. That, if you look at the motion below, it doesn't actually, based on the lack of reference to AM Cunningham, technically doesn't speak to that population. So we actually could pass the motion here, and arguably, without an interest, if staff were to look into it, could still direct the students to Glen Bray for grades 6 to 8. However, if there is an interest to go to Glen Ballard, then staff would have to return to us and I assume look for that approval, because we're silent on that right now, and this motion is silent on it right now, technically, and that's an oversight, so I apologize for that, because I didn't catch that at the committee level either. So maybe in terms of focusing this discussion, we can look at the 2 streams mentioned here, Glen Echo and Glen Bray, debate this motion, and then following that we can look at the AM Cunningham stream and what they would attend. Does that make sense to everyone? Is that fair for clarity purposes, so we don't talk about 3 different issues at once? Possibly, yes. Okay, I see nods. Some people understood what I said. Okay, Trustee Van Geffen, go ahead.
Just for clarity, but correct me if I'm wrong, being a West Ender, as I look at this East End piece, but the feasibility of Ballard running a program next year would be based on also polling the graduating grade 5 class from Glen Echo, or at least that portion, to make that new program functional, would it not?
You wouldn't get pickup from them, but the issue at hand would be you would sample the Cunningham grade 5 class, and you would need probably at least a threshold of a dozen students or more that would want to start a Ballard class. That would be my understanding. But I would look to the director from a staffing perspective, how many Cunningham students would be required to choose Ballard to open that program?
Thank you. We would at least want 1 full class, and if you're looking at junior, we're usually around 24 to 25 students that would make a commitment to have at least 1 class.
Okay. And do we know how many grade 5 students we have at Cunningham right now? 1 or 2 classes worth? 2 classes worth? So we'd need probably about 50% of the current classes to choose Ballard, roughly. So that's just contextual, not scientific, but that's just a quick math for everyone. Okay. Trustee Van Pattison?
Another point of clarification. So when I first asked Superintendent Gillies what happens if we pass this, the answer was that basically the intention is that all 2 to 8s would go to Glen Echo or Glen Bray, whatever it is. So to pass this before making some kind of a amendment saying, I mean, I'm fine with this. I mean, if this is what the phone survey said, then let's pass this. I'm just saying that I don't want to let this go because I have brought this up all throughout this FI process to many people many times about, are we going to have a point? I mean, even at our board meeting while I was on the phone in December, are we going to have a point where we can talk about what's going to happen with this grade 6 cohort? Because I mean, if we ask and we don't get half, we asked. We gave them an option. We gave them their voice, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and then we can say we've done that. That's all I'm really asking out of this.
So at this time, just to move the item forward, I just want to summarize a couple of things and get to what Trustee Pattison's mentioning, so we at least everyone's on the same page. So first, we do have the motions from a couple of weeks ago. We've already determined the grade 1 piece. Staff have informed us that unfortunately it's not feasible, and we'll continue it at Glen Echo for next September. The following September, we'll offer all 3 options again, and if whatever is feasible, we'll offer. That's already done. Next step is the current Glen Echo, Glen Bray stream, not including Cunningham. That's what the motion speaks to very explicitly on the page here. So let's discuss this motion, keeping the Cunningham question out of this, because that does require some clarity. But to the Glen Echo, Glen Bray stream and the recommendation on this page, parking Cunningham for a second, do we have any questions or comments? Thank you. Trustee Beatty.
Thank you, and through the chair, you did make mention, Mr. Chair, of the previous motion governing the possible startup of the program in the 2019 school year, and that was my question, actually, just wanting to make sure that that previous motion would still allow for polling of the student population, particularly in the Lower Stoney Creek and East Hamilton areas, to see if there is an appetite for the creation of a grade 1 program. My ask would be specifically at the Eastdale site, should it be available, and that's pending a number of things, including the construction of the new school. But I want to make sure that that motion still stands, and that would still happen.
Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you, and through the chair, yes, that is the intention, or that is how staff would operationalize this motion. It refers to existing students, so those are the ones that are already there. When we talk about the new grade 1 population coming in, we would go through that process next year, and there is the possibility of either having 1, 2, or 3 different FI classes in 3 different schools, depending on the results of the survey and the registrations.
Thank you. Trustee Beatty?
Could I make the recommendation to staff that, knowing that we're going to be doing some polling of these populations, if we could task the Research and Analytics Department to perform that function instead of a phone poll, maybe do something that was a little, we have the time, is what I'm saying. We have the time to do a more concrete, comprehensive survey instead of a phone poll. Could we put a plan in place to do something a little more formal or concrete so that we make sure that we're capturing accurate data?
Thank you. Mr. Director?
The chair will take that away, but this year it will be part of our grade 1 registration that we did this year, and it was pretty comprehensive, but we'll be sure that we're clear in these communities in terms of what it looks like when the options on the table.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So then to build on that, instead of my previous comment of having research and analytics work as part of the application process so that we can determine right away if there would be sufficient numbers for the creation of the program as stated in the previous motion. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So to the current motion, Trustee Hicks.
Why are we splitting the 5s at Cunningham going to 6s in Ballard? Why wouldn't this all be one motion? And add to the addendum. So we're talking about French immersion, right? And we're talking about boundary review. That's why it's here. Mm-hmm. I'm a little concerned that you're splitting them.
So it's not so much a voluntary effort to split. It's because the motion that's being recommended by oversight did not name Cunningham. They're not really in here, unfortunately, to suggest that they attend Glen Bray. So currently the motion speaks to the Glen Echo and Glen Bray students. It doesn't explicitly reference Cunningham. If someone thinks that I'm misreading that, please stop me. But at first glance, this doesn't speak to the Cunningham. But although I'm looking for any input, Executive Associate Director Sovern.
Thank you. And through the chair, the motion does read that French immersion students living within the New East Hamilton and Lower Stoney Creek FI catchments continue at Glen Echo and Glen Bray. We have interpreted that as being those students living in that catchment area that would naturally continue on from AM Cunningham to Glen Bray. So,
but then arguably they should also be attending Glen Echo, if you read it that same way, because Cunningham would exist from 1 to 5. It's blurry, and that's why I'm giving Trustee Pattison the benefit of the doubt. Trustee Hicks is correct that the intention was what we've all described, but in fairness, the motion doesn't say that. That's what I'm getting at, and that's why we're going to get this one approved, if it's the will of the board, and then we'll turn to the Cunningham piece, and then we are splitting them because unless someone wants to move an amendment, we'd have to treat them separately out of fairness. Trustee Danko?
Just to clarify, if we approved the current motion as it stands and separated out the Cunningham piece, it means staffing can happen for this part that's already approved, and then there's only a delay for Cunningham staffing potentially. Yes. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. It'd be a difference of one staff member either at Glen Bray or Ballard, essentially. Okay, so keeping once again the Cunningham stream, parking that, not the original intention, but having to park that, looking to the Glen Echo, Glen Bray streams, including the Stoney Creek students. Any further questions on that? Trustee Deeth?
So we saw some correspondence that was in support of this motion, correct? I think all of us received the correspondence. So was there any other correspondence that was against it? Because all I saw was for it.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a good question. I would go to the superintendents that hosted the consultation session, perhaps remind us the consultation that took place. We approved that as a board, if I recall correctly, in December, potentially. I believe it was December, so perhaps I'll go to Superintendent Gillies, and I know he had support of Superintendent Dunlop and Denemy as well, but Superintendent Gillies, can you please remind us, back from our motion to approve consultation, what took place and what did we hear?
Thank you. And through the chair, just a reminder to trustees that following the motion on December 18th, 2017, that staff went out and engaged with French immersion parents in both Lower Stoney Creek and East Hamilton. And that public consultation took place on January 11th. And as was mentioned, it included Superintendent Denemy and Superintendent Dunlop. Through the engagement process, we heard very clearly from parents, especially those parents of existing FI students in East Hamilton, including AM Cunningham, that there was a strong desire to keep siblings together, if possible, to delay the relocation until absolutely necessary, avoid a gradual transition where siblings or peers would be in different sites and move all grades together. We also heard through that process that the strong desire to maintain grade 1 French immersion at Glen Echo. While that was taking place, we also received the architectural plans that confirmed that Glen Bray could remain open while the construction of the new school was taking place. So there was a lot happening at that point in time, but certainly through that consultation, and we were tasked by the board to undergo that, we heard a strong wish to remain at the Glen sites. And so that's where we move forward with the next phase of consultation, which was the phone survey. And there, again, we received much support for grade 1 to also be held at Glen Echo. And that's the reason the motion is as we see it. By no means am I saying that we had consistent support all around. There were mixed perspectives based on different family circumstances, but certainly overall the majority of parents made it quite clear to keep French immersion at the 2 sites of Glen Echo and Glen Bray until a move was absolutely necessary. And we're looking at the necessity being September 2020.
Thank you, Superintendent Gillies. I forgot who asked that question. Who asked that question? Where you are. Thank you, Trustee Deeth. Back to you. Good, excellent. You convinced me as well. That's why I forgot who asked the question. Okay, further debate, once again, to what's on the page, referring to Glen Echo, Glen Bray, and the Stoney Creek folks. Any further questions? Trustee Johnstone.
Just a clarification. During the public consultation and then the phone survey, was A.M. Cunningham families included in that consultation?
So yes to the first part, no to the second. The survey was meant for grade 1 registration. That wasn't applicable, but through the other consultation, yes, they were equally involved as everyone else. Keeping in mind there was also a boundary review committee. There's all of that process in place as well, as per our policies. Further speakers to the Glen Echo, Glen Bray piece. All in favor? Excellent. We're down, we have 2 motions now on the books. Last piece is the Cunningham students and their registration next September, whether it's at Glen Bray, Ballard, or some combination of both. That's the question that remains. I think the intention of the committee, because this was an oversight, was for that stream to continue to attend Glen Bray. In fairness, I mean, I just want to balance everything here in terms of what the committee was recommending. I looked at the chair of the committee, and please be patient for a second, but looked at the chair of the committee if you would like to move the committee's intention in this case, if that makes sense, just because the committee did have a recommendation, it was not captured in the wording. So if you want to bring what the committee had suggested for the A.M. Cunningham stream, that might be a helpful part to start the conversation. If not, then I'll go to Trustee Pattison. No pressure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I struggle with this, not knowing this area as well as I probably should, but as my interpretation of the will of the committee as we discuss this is that we are trying to keep, like I keep hearing, the relocation of programs, but much of the discussion was not, we're not relocating programs, we're starting 2 new programs in Lower Stoney Creek and in East Hamilton. And in this particular piece, totally understanding the with regards to the transitions, but in terms of keeping cohorts together and when the move has to happen, that the move was going to happen from Glen Bray into Ballard. And when that move happens from Glen Bray into Ballard, the move coinciding with that was going to be from Glen Bray into Eastdale. So I'm not sure if that helps.
So the committee, this is to Wes's question earlier, what isn't it in there? The committee had recommended, and I think staff had recommended, that the A.M. Cunningham stream continue to attend Glen Bray until September 2020, i.e. the new school opening on the Glen campus. I think it's that simple. But I'll look to the Associate Director Zucker, if that was the recommendation. I know we didn't capture that in wording clearly, but is that the recommendation? And then if so, is that what the committee, or what we thought the committee approved, Associate Director?
Thank you, and through the chair, yes, that was the intention of the motion.
Okay, so as chair of the committee, do you want to move that, just to get it on the floor, doesn't mean we have to pass it, but I'm just trying to keep this as clean as possible. Would you like to move that the Cunningham Stream continue to attend Ballard until June 2020?
Sorry, that the Cunningham Stream continue at...
The stream continue to attend Ballard, Glenbrae. I said continue.
See, that doesn't help in all of this. And my only piece in this is as committee chair, yes, I am committee chair right now, but help me with this because I'm looking across the table to Trustee Hicks. When this came forward before, correct me if I'm wrong, but this came forward as Trustee Hicks as committee chair. So where I don't mind moving what is being suggested here, should that be me or should that be the chair of the committee at the time when it was moved?
I'll try this one more time. Associate Director Zucker, can you please tell us staff's recommendation for the Cunningham Stream? And then I'll kindly ask if someone would like to move that and put that on the floor for discussion.
Thank you, and through the chair, staff's recommendation would be that the students currently attending Cunningham would continue on to attend Glenbrae until June 2020.
Thank you. Would someone like to move that? Thank you, Chair of the Committee, Van Geffen. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Trustee Beatty. Now we have the direction on the floor, and that was the original intention. Now it can be debated, referred, motioned, voted down, voted in favor, whatever. But at least now we can discuss it. So with that, speakers to the Cunningham Stream continuing Glenbrae until June 2020. Trustee Pattison.
Thank you. I'm not really sure what just happened there because I was asked if I felt comfortable not making an amendment to C, but unfortunately, this is my probably only time to have a little discussion here. So this is quite simple. I mean, we approve to have a survey of these students and see what happens. And if nothing happens, they go to Glenbrae. It's really that simple. I mean, we always keep siblings together anyways. That's not really even a discussion. If they want to go to Glenbrae because they have kids there, other siblings there, great. We always make those. We gave Parkdale and Eastdale as an option, but we didn't give Ballard. All I'm saying is that we give the Ballard option the same attention that we gave the grade ones. I realize that we pulled grade ones from enrollments, whereas we would have to, I guess, cold call grade 5 students at Cunningham to not their students, but their parents to see if there's interest. I don't think this is a tough ask. They're going to spend 2 days on the phone calling some parents. We're going to come back here, a couple weeks, month, whatever it is, to approve it. It's well in time for April 15th. If they're making provisions for 1 or 2 teachers already at Glenbrae, or I'm sorry, I really apologize, I keep getting them wrong. But what's the difference if they go to Ballard or Glen Echo? So all I'm asking you is that you defeat this motion and you give me the opportunity to place a motion to just have a survey done. Come back 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is, and have this discussion again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Pattison. Trustee Hicks.
I agree with Trustee Pattison, and that's why I didn't want them split, because if you talked about it initially and we had a motion there, we should have kept them together. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about fairness here, and I think the grade 12 or the grade 5s at Cunningham should have that opportunity to go to Ballard.
Thank you. Trustee Beatty.
Thank you, through the chair. I seconded the motion, but I probably will vote against it. I think that it would be in the best interest of the community, and I support I think it's been important that we have the conversation, which is why I seconded the motion so that we can have this conversation around the floor. But I do believe that what Trustee Pattison is asking for is prudent. It's really exactly the same as we've given the other communities the opportunity to participate in, so it seems only fair.
Thank you. Trustee Deeth.
So can I just ask, so you want to give them, for clarity, AM Cunningham the option of going to Ballard or Glenbrae, correct? Is that creating a new FI in Ballard, or does one currently exist, or you're talking about creating a new one in Ballard and potentially splitting families from Cunningham between Ballard and Glenbrae?
So we would be starting a new FI program. It would not discontinue the Glenbrae program. It would simply sample if to Trustee Patterson's proposal, it would sample the grade 5 class at Cunningham to see if there's enough students that could compose a class next September at Ballard.
Sorry, so if I could just finish that.
Yes.
So what you're going to ask them, the Cunningham parents, or if they would wanting to choose between the two schools, and from that, are we looking at potentially splitting or deciding on one or the other?
It would have to be splitting because the class at Glenbrae would continue. There is going to be a grade 6, 7, and 8 at Glenbrae, despite the decision regarding Ballard.
So that would split. So grade 5 students in FI, that would split them potentially, taking some of their classmates into one school and some of their classmates into the other. And that's my concern, because where I've seen that happen before is, sometimes parents make the decision on location or whatever, but splitting classmates at that age, is when I've heard back, and it hasn't been maybe the greatest decision. So I think keeping kids together where possible and just keeping that in mind, as opposed to just, the closest location. I just hope we keep that in consideration.
Thank you. I'd like to add myself to the speakers list, but now that this is neat and tidy, finally, I'd like to turn the chair over for the remainder of the item to the vice chair. And then I'll speak, and then if you can share the rest of the item. Thank you.
Trustee White.
Thank you. So to this item, as a ward trustee for one of the 3 or 4 areas involved, I've followed this very closely, and I know Trustee Beattie has, because it was mainly our populations that are affected. Trustee Mulholland a little less so, and Trustee Johnson a little less so, but it does affect them. But nonetheless, having followed this, I've heard a lot from Cunningham families. I've heard of Ballard. I've looked at what we're offering in terms of Glenbrae, Stoney Creek option, and actually similar to what Trustee Deeth landed on or suggested is kind of where this all ended up. This is what we had said at the committee, which is we really didn't want to disrupt any existing streams. So everyone, minus those registered in grade 1, or registering in grade 1, are already on a path. And through this consultation, we've heard that they don't want that path disrupted, the clear majority of that. They don't want their classes broken up earlier than they have to. They want to attend the next class. And I think that's a standard that we've held everyone, whether it's Stoney Creek or East Hamilton, because arguably we could ask existing, and this is just to play devil's advocate on the other side, there's students that attend Glen Echo that might live beside Parkdale. Why aren't we surveying grade 3s at Glen Echo to see if enough of them want to split and go to Parkdale next September? Or why aren't we doing that in Stoney Creek and looking if there's a grade 6 class that wants to start in Stoney Creek next September? We could, right? Because technically those populations exist, the schools exist, but when we played out all those scenarios, no matter what we landed on, we did exactly what Trustee D said, which was, wait a second, if you're already registered and on a stream, or in a stream, they don't want to split. And it creates a lot of disruption and a lot of inconsistencies between groups. Do we let Stoney Creek break off first? Do we let East Hamilton break off first? And then I've received calls as well from Ballard, and it's not scientific, but I joked at the public consultation that I never actually saw Superintendent Dunlop because she was surrounded by so many parents. I didn't even know she was there, and I was there for over an hour. There were breakout sessions, and she was in one corner, and she probably had the most number of questions go her way, and a lot of it was that concern about not attending Glenbrae, which was an established French program with French resources, with French supports, and leaving that stream early and somehow feeling disadvantaged by not benefiting from the Glenbrae established French model. So we've learned this through transitions, and you can play both ways. On one hand, you can say it's hard for them to transition to Glenbrae, then go back to Ballard 2 years later. but at the same time, they would be following more of their colleagues and not have to depart earlier at the program's expense or try to develop something that's not already there. So with respect, what Trustee Pattison is asking may in fact prove itself right or wrong in a couple of weeks with a survey. I don't think it does any harm. But in terms of my support, I would support the current recommendation, which is to get the stream going. I think there would be more disruption in the Cunningham community if we suggested to them now that they have to pick between two different schools. I don't think it does any favors for the community, unfortunately. I get where Trustee Pattison's coming from. So I would vote for the motion for them to attend Glen Bray. But at the same time, if it is turned down, I would support Trustee Pattison's alternative. But for good reason, I'm confident this time to support the motion on the floor. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further speakers? Trustee Pattison?
First, I'm not sure if I get any more time because I didn't use a whole 5 minutes. That would have to go through a second round of speakers. But I did have a point of clarification. I'm sure Penny knows. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that Ballard will be a French immersion school either way in 2020. But there's just some hope that it will start earlier. That's all. Thank you.
Further questions?
Am I able to speak again, or are we going to allow second round speakers? Or
so, sorry, you have completed your 5 minutes, but I am going to allow you to wrap up. Yeah, but I am going to allow you to wrap up on that. So Greg, if you would like to wrap up, please do.
Sure. All the discussion, I am aligned with a lot of what Trustee White has said here. I think what we're talking about is an immediate survey. We've discussed the survey that is going to happen for September 2019. I guess what's in question here is a survey required for September 2018. And I fall back to many of the points put forward and the assumptions that I was working under in making these decisions is that there is strength in keeping some of these groups and keeping these groups together before we're closing out the program on the Glen campus and starting the two new programs. So I, again, very similar to Trustee White, very understanding to where Trustee Pattison is coming forward. We'll support this. If it doesn't move forward, then hopefully we have something that gives a bit of direction and go from there. That's me wrapping up.
Can I please have the Superintendent Zucker to repeat the motion for us again?
The motion would be that the students currently attending AM Cunningham would continue to attend Glen Bray until June 2020.
Seeing no further questions, comments, I am going to go to a vote on this. All in favor? Trustee Archer, Trustee Bingham, Trustee Mulholland, Trustee Johnstone, Trustee White, Trustee Van Geffen, and Trustee Deeth. Those against? Trustee Beatty, Trustee Hicks, Trustee Pattison, Trustee Danko. And the motion passes. Thank you. And I'll pass the chair back to Trustee White.
Thank you very much. That completes the Finance and Facilities Committee report. Item number 9, resolution to Committee of the Whole private session as per Education Act 2072B. Do we have a motion to move in camera? Moved by Trustee Van Geffen, seconded by Trustee Bingham. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll move to the side room and we'll be back in public session when we are finished. Thank you. Okay, folks, we are now back in public session. Item number 10, report from Committee of the Whole, private session from a moment ago. We'll ask the Vice Chair kindly to read the verbal report. Trustee Johnstone.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, it is my pleasure to present the report of the private session of the Committee of the Whole held earlier this evening, engaging in Phase 1 of property disposition process for Red Hill School property, engaging in Phase 2 of the property disposition process for Cardinal Heights property, and land severances.
Yeah, a late edition.
As well as authorization to demolish Eastdale School at the end of June 2018.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the verbal report. Do we have a seconder? Trustee Archer, thank you. Questions, comments? All in favor? That is unanimous. Just to note that Trustee Pattison has left the meeting. At this time, we move to oral reports. We'll start with 11A, student trustee report. And seeing as it's just you, Ruby, you got the floor.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So I guess I'm taking both parts of the report. So I'll start with Osta ACO. The past weekend, the 15th to 18th, we were at BCCs, or Board Council Conferences, with Osta ACO alongside RECFO, which is the French Student Trustee Organization. And it was really great. It was a really good networking opportunity, and we learned a lot about bilingualism and education. We had two really good speakers. One was Indigenous sensitivity training that my committee managed to get, which was really cool. And then another, and that was Jody Alexander from HWDSB. And then our second speaker was Maxime Lee, who is a bilingual speaker and spoke to us about mental health and student-led mental health initiatives. Some of the stuff that OSTA is up to: the Ontario Student Voice Award applications are now available to grade 12 students across Ontario, and so student trustees are promoting that. Morgan's committee, the Progress Committee, is working on updating the Student Trustee Handbook and is working on creating an infographic version of the handbook and creating conference videos. And they also ran the BCC Icebreakers, which were great. And then my committee, Indigenous Relations, is in the process of reaching out to various Indigenous trustees and communities across Ontario, especially in northern regions. And we'll be reaching out online and through the contacts that we're developing to create an Indigenous Student Advisory Council for Osta ACO, whose goal will be to inform student trustees at Osta ACO and to advise our actions and policies. And then in terms of local activities, so Secondary Senate will be working with HWDSB Arts Department and Karen Wilkins specifically to promote and run the opening night of the annual HWDSB Arts exhibit. And we're also working on our constitution, which is set to be finished for mid-April so that we can have a solid structure for Senate. We're really looking forward to student trustee elections, so we're promoting that pretty hard because we want to make sure that there's good representation across the board in terms of who the candidates are. And our social media is starting up. Follow us on Instagram at HWDSB Students. We're going to start posting tonight, I believe, with various social media campaigns starting this week. And that's both Senates for social media. So yeah, that I'd like to move the report. Question?
Sure. Excellent. Thank you very much. With that, questions, comments, Trustee Edith?
So just a question in regards to the, for the student trustees, how are you promoting it to the schools?
The election?
Yeah.
So one of the big things that we're doing is going through our senators. So Sean made us a really great poster that we've given to all of our senators to put around their schools. We're also going to be visiting a couple schools, specifically schools that haven't been represented at Senate for the past few months or haven't historically had representation in terms of candidates for the position of student trustee. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Trustee Johnstone.
just thought it was good to join the students in Ottawa. I did attend Ostiago along with in my position of OPSPA, as I'm currently chairing an ad hoc committee on strengthening our relationship with student trustees and OPSPA. We were joined by Lori French, who's the president of OPSPA, as well as the chair of the Ottawa School Board. And I have to say the students were so professional. They could teach all of the adults a lesson. They asked the panel phenomenal questions around Indigenous education, around inclusive learning and special education, 21st century learning. They did ask about transportation as well. And the students were just, and they had so many ideas and suggestions in order to improve the relationship with, I'll call them adult trustees. When I arrived, the students were engaged in media training, where half the students were pretending to be closing a school and the other half were pretending to be reporters, and they had to develop questions they thought the reporters would ask, and the students, all of them, were just so professional about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, comments? See none. Mr. Director?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll be brief. I wanted to highlight a few things under our 5 priorities. Under positive culture and well-being, I think tomorrow a few trustees and I will be honoring one of our outstanding principal candidates who will be honored tomorrow by the Learning Partnership. M. Del Sordo has been given that well-deserved award, so we're looking forward to attending tomorrow night's celebration, and something we should be very proud of. Under student learning achievement, again with one of our students who was honored, Alec, he was a winner of our John C. Holland Awards. I was able to attend that evening with Christine Bingham. We had also had other students from Sir John A. Macdonald and Westdale who were also nominated, but it was a pleasure to be there on that stormy night and enjoy the evening and see one of our students be recognized. Also under effective communication, under leadership of our communication manager, we're starting again with really looking at our strategic communication plan. One of the deliverables this year and that priority is to have our strategic communication plan developed, and there's some ad hoc committee and really focus groups that are providing insight and input to that. And I participated in that with the trustee Bingham as well. On February 12th, we were both present. And wanted to highlight again under school renewal and partnerships. Most recently, I want to thank facility staff and our senior officer, Dave Anderson, who's here this evening. I think many times when I visit schools, just take for granted the leadership that's helping move some of our capital plan forward. And it's great to see that leadership, and when there's challenges, how that leadership responds. So I want to publicly thank Dave and his team, and Stacy as well, Associate Director, who oversees that. Under partnerships, I want to highlight a few exciting things. Most recently, went downtown last week. There was a soup fest at the convention center, and got a chance to meet a lot of our partners, and there was a fundraiser there, and I was asked to be celebrity soup server. Thank goodness that when I arrived, someone asked me who I was, so my celebrity status feedback was given to me right away, but it was great to be there. I was there with David Hoy, and a great way to give back to the community and raise funds for a worthy cause. Also coming up, I would just ask trustees to know, as we think about partnerships, I sit on the Industry Education Council, and one of their mandates is to provide those experiential learning opportunities for students. And with Arcel Mattel DeFasco and that great partnerships, our second elementary robotics challenge will be happening here March 26th. More information will come. It'll be in the director's update. But just another example how the partners are helping support opportunities for our students. And since this is our last board meeting before March break, although since we don't have one next Monday, but a committee meeting, I wish everyone happy, safe March break and a time to unwind and to connect. And that's my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move to the chair's report. I, too, will be briefer. The only update, and by this point of the meeting, we've already covered all of our business, essentially, for the past month or a couple of weeks, but just one quick update on trustee ward combinations. and that process moving forward. As you may have noticed, some of those items have been delayed or deferred in terms of governance meetings and information to trustees. We are awaiting the correct data from MPAC/the City of Hamilton. We were told that it should be received momentarily. It does put us within pretty tight timelines to approve new combinations, which are due by the end of this month. So Heather and I will be working out a schedule, and we'll communicate with trustees likely tomorrow or Wednesday at the latest, in terms of mapping out meeting dates, approvals, and hopefully an element of consultation. But all of that will be fully spelled out to trustees this week. We do have a meeting tentatively scheduled for Thursday, March 1st. That is scheduled to be the first meeting on the topic. However, because we do not have the data yet, that meeting is still up in the air. So stay tuned, but we'll communicate all of that information tomorrow or hopefully Wednesday at the latest. Trustee Van Geft?
So are you saying there's a chance that the Thursday meeting, if we don't have the information, could be postponed?
Potentially, yes. So I think Trustee Miller, Trustee Officer Miller will know probably by Tuesday or Wednesday whether the information will be ready. Once staff have the data, it will likely take them at least a day or two to compile it and present it in a form that's effective to trustees. So if we only get it on, say, Wednesday or Thursday, it'd be very likely the Thursday meeting would be postponed. If we do have the meeting in hand by tomorrow morning, we may be able to have the meeting ready to go for Thursday. So that's why I say that there will be an update tomorrow or Wednesday at the latest. Thank you. So with that, we'll keep everyone in the loop. Further motion to adjourn? Moved by Trustee Van Geffen, seconded by Trustee Bingham. All in favor? That is unanimous.